Hi, everyone, and welcome to Upai's Dharma Talk, our poetry series with Miriam Sagan. So, to say a little bit about Miriam, Miriam is the author of 30 published books, including the novel Black Rainbow and Geographic, a memoir of time and space, which won the 2016 Arizona New Mexico Book Award in Poetry. She founded and headed the creative writing program at Santa Fe Community College until her retirement in 2016. Her blog, Miriam's Well, which I'll post a link of here, has 1,500 daily readers. She has been a writer in residence in 4 national parks at Yaddo, McDowell, Colorado Art Ranch, Andrews Experimental Forest Center for Land Use Interpretation, Iceland's Gulkistan Residency for Creative People, and another dozen or so remote and unique places. That's amazing. I hope you talk about that, Miriam. She was at the Kura Studio, Hiroshima, Japan, where she was working on text installations as part of the creative team Maternal Mitochondria. Her awards include the Santa Fe Mayor's Award for Excellence in the Arts, the Poetry Gratitude Award from New Mexico Literary Arts, and the Lannan Foundation Residency in Marfa. Miriam, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll begin with the verse before the Dharma talk.
We now have a chance to hear it, study it, and practice it. We vow to realize its true meaning. The Dharma is vast and subtle. We now have a chance to hear it, study it, and practice it. We vow to realize its true meaning. The Dharma is vast and subtle. We now have the chance to hear it, study it, and practice it. We vow to realize its true meaning.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me all right? I need to know. All right, good, thank you. It's very nice to see you, and it's nice to be with you. It's the time of day that we start to approach evening, and I'm going to be reading, the first half of the reading is going to be about the night sky. So please do me a favor later on tonight, look up over Saragordo Park and see what you can see as we start to come into the autumn equinox. I'm reading from a book of mine called Stargazing, which came out very recently, and it's a sort of collected about the night sky. A lot of the poems are old poems, but I decided that I would write a poem for each planet. And yes, I included Pluto. When you start to think about the planets creatively, you come up against a lot of history. There's symphonic music about the planets, there's astrology, there's all kinds of ideas about what the planets mean. And I did not want to stay with the traditional Greco-Roman classical view of the planets. I wanted to, if you can say this about celestial bodies, personalize them. So although I'm reading from the book quite a bit, because it's new, I have never read all of the planets all the way through, and we're just gonna have to imagine the sun has already happened, and we're gonna move out in the solar system. So thank you for going with me. And here's the secret that's sunk or hidden into these poems, is that they were written in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. And Truth or Consequences, New Mexico has a spaceport. It is a direct main line to the universe Also, its name is Truth or Consequences. How irresistible is that? Mercury, the bathhouse. I stretched out my old legs, my very old toes in the concrete tub where hot water gushes from the earth just for my aches and pains. All 9 planets were present at my birth, are present now, just not visible, today in January, in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. The woman tourist said it was ugly here, little falling downtown with its decrepit charm, nothing prettier than a string of Christmas lights in the dusk. Don't get me wrong. I also don't welcome the messenger between the living and the dead. An email I sent myself appears years later, or roses delivered to the wrong address. I'd rather forget than remember. In sleep, still through the steam of the bath, the rainy streets of the metropolis I was born in appear slick and reflecting colored lights of the past. Venus is subtitled The Warrior, and that is from the Mesoamerican tradition, where Venus is essentially playing hardball in the underworld and then coming back up to see us, because Venus is only here part of the time, and sometimes in the morning and sometimes at night. So this is not Aphrodite, Venus the warrior. Feathered warrior with a spear, sometimes rising, sometimes in the underworld, playing hardball on a key-shaped court, playing jai-alai with a skull, or hummingbird, tiny and ferocious, sharp-billed, indomitable, even the little quail scurrying beneath Palo Verde, where their headdresses, one black feather swaying from a helmet. Which was the real planet Venus? Morning star, evening star, brightest after the moon, casting shadows or what we don't see, veiled by reflective clouds of sulfuric acid, water there once. Next is Mars, who would traditionally be the god of war. And this is indeed about war, but it's called the survivors. Sometimes as a writer, or often as a writer, you hear stories that are not yours. People tell you things, and also you're listening. And there's some stories in here that I don't possess, but that I would say were given to me or lent to me. And I'm telling these stories in the poem, Mars Survivors. They play chess. The chief of police of the Balkan town, his Jewish friend. One night, the policeman appears with train tickets for everyone in the family. He says, "My friend, I've been watching, and now it's time for you to go, to live, to tell the tale." I hear stories of war, of a mother and daughter hidden in plain sight on the streets of Paris, of a stranger who puts a desperate family into a taxi and sends them 2 days away to Constantinople. I see Mars almost twinkling in our atmosphere, flashing red, the color itself, that of spectrum shifting away from us, the color of other things as well. Jupiter, king of the gods, is usually a pretty cheery character in terms of the planets. I don't know, by the time I was in the middle of this sequence, perhaps I was a little stressed out. I was getting on my own nerves, trying to figure out, lying there at the Pelican Inn in Truth or Consequences for 2 weeks, trying to figure out how to deal with these planets. And so Jupiter's patriarchy. Every bad card from the pack turns up. The emperor, the devil, those fixed things that refuse to change. Who turned me into an old woman? Time. When I was just messing around, not paying attention. It's never too early or too late to say, fuck with me, you die. To break a hold, smash an instep, to survive a mosh pit, and an unknown future. The largest planet is ringed by moons, is bright, magnetic, heavy. The great red spot is a storm that keeps raging. If you meet a guru, call it a day. Star or wanderer, do look at your feet. Can you run in those shoes? Saturn is traditionally old age, and I've kept Saturn as old age, and here's a haiku to go with it. Saturn. Joshua trees, we sleep beneath the rings of Saturn. Uranus, emanation. The astronomer regards Uranus from the city of Bath, where those cool holding pools lap against ancient mosaic. You think of the past as what? A kind of perfection, a kind of disaster. Either a colonnade in white marble or the blood that's washed away in time, unfinished. Labyrinth, what's invisible in the daylight sky. You wanted continuity about the difference between yourself and a maze. Clutching the right hand way, then the left, featureless at first, glance, ice, rock, then illuminated. The next one is Neptune, the gates of ivory and horn. And that does come really from Homer and Virgil, who talk about there being two gates through which dreams come. True dreams and not so true dreams, or more mundane dreams. I had a dream when I was living for 2 weeks at the Pelican in Truth or Consequences. And I dreamed about my cousin, and her last name is Neptune. I mean, really and truly, not a taken name. And she appeared to me in the dream. In the dream, she tells me the dead can communicate with us. I don't believe that. Say no. It's just as if the elevator opened at the wrong floor. You always say that, she says. But when I wake up, I realize I never say that. I'm not even sure exactly what it means. The planet Neptune can't be seen with the naked eye. Its existence is predicted by a wobble. Galileo thought it a fixed star and therefore isn't credited with its discovery. This doesn't seem quite fair to me. It's an ice giant, and depending on what you believe, the outermost planet or second farthest away from us. You yourself can compare this to whatever pleases you. The living, the dead. Frankly, I'm getting a little worn out comparing things all day and then in my dreams. Don't forget though, metaphor works both ways. If sleep is its own expanse of universe, then the cosmos must also be sleeping. Sleepy maybe, and having trouble staying up late like me, but asleep? I think not. So then, of course, I knew I was going to do Pluto. I mean, I was raised on Pluto, right? You know, if you ever made a model of the solar system when you were, in grade school, you had Pluto if you're my age. And so Pluto has just got to be in there, but its subtitle is ambivalence because sometimes Pluto's in and sometimes Pluto's out. We almost got hit and killed last night on the road behind the dam when another car came out of nowhere. Or it's good I hadn't pulled into the lane when the driver took the turn too fast. Or luck saved me. Or a guardian angel so I could arrive on time, go to the party with people not really my friends. Or you've been dead almost 25 years and I hear a phone ringing in a casita without a phone. The music of the spheres dazzles over the rented house. Mathematics implies a planet. The astronomer finds it only smaller than imagined. America wants to discover its own celestial body, and suddenly there is Pluto over Flagstaff, Arizona. Things come and go. Grief, amusement, and the planet Pluto. I've changed my mind and everything and nothing, patterns arranged to receive and delight me, and all those other half-born worlds. So that takes us out. And I'll probably come back and read a few night sky poems at the end. But I also have been writing a lot about microcosm and soil and what is invisible that's living along with us. And so I'm going to read some from a book that came out earlier this year called Beasts. But it's also, it's funny, I think of it as a book about microcosm, but it's actually a fairly personal book, and a lot of it is set in the high plains in Nebraska, Kansas. I was in residence at Agate National Monument, which is a giant fossil quarry from the Miocene era of mammals. And it's a very magical, unfiltered place in terms of its history and in terms of its weather. And it's funny, living in New Mexico my whole adult life, I was kind of stuck up. I thought, I can access big empty space, and this threw me for a loop. It was bigger and emptier. And so the poems in here are mixed in terms of different locations. Battle of Punished Woman's Fork, Kansas, 1878. I asked the lady at the desk at the state park what the name means. She says, in 11 years here, no one has asked me that question, but she doesn't offer an answer. The land is covered in marks, so too the map, although the soil itself might just crumble through our fingers. Nothing to tell me who is punished woman and what was her fate. But is there any portion on earth that might not bear her name? I have a fondness for advice, bossiness, having my fortune told. And this is written in the voice of a fortune teller. It's really about giving directions. It's the imperative. I think that if you're paying attention, your whole day will give you advice. But this is a little bit of an ironic poem on that level. Palm reader. I see you hesitate at the mouth of the alley of red blossoms and drug dealers. Also wonder if you need 2 for the price of 1 rhinestone sandals. Believe me, you don't. You can't have one thing without the other. Your lifeline shows death just by ending. Enjoy this state of mind. The past is gone. You heard that here first and for a price. Go on into your future that must resemble it. I suggest sneakers as your shoes for feet that hurt. Your fate is you. There's money in your palm, so don't go barefoot. To write a book of poems is to be half awake, is to be working, I think, in the dark, not in a coma, not in a trance, but not in ordinary reality either, which is to say, there's connections in these poems that I was unaware of. Shoes seem to show up every so often, and the need for different kinds of footwear. You could write an essay about shoes and poetry. Is it about being grounded? Is it about lack? What does it mean? But also, I just think that a poet has a relationship to poetry that's like any relationship. It's intimate, it's semi-successful. Sometimes it works really well, sometimes less well. And since apparently footwear is important to me, it'll show up from time to time. This is a poem about Willa Cather, great American writer. I went to Red Cloud to see where she grew up, slept in the house that she was raised in, which is very magical. Red Cloud, 1. Lace curtains, Venus at dusk, Nebraska. An old story, wind ruffles the pages of a book. No longer salvage, an expensive quilt. Prairie, wind, train whistle, loneliness made more lonely by a lonely tale. 2. Blue horses come over the ridge of the mind. Warriors painted on hide. Songlines tell us about water, no water. Even a small girl in her nightgown might fly barefoot over the town steeples and train tracks. Everything in its essence yearns to go elsewhere. This very short poem was written before COVID, but it actually expressed something that I really felt, which is that just because a life form doesn't have my happiness as its agenda, doesn't mean it's not a life form, such as myself. And so it's called Even the Pathogen. Even the pathogen yearns to live and flourish. There's a black squirrel at the bird feeder. You might prefer chickadees, but contrary to expectation, these woods are not ours. Beasts in the earth that eat decay, autumnal forest, the rotting log, devour the death of others. Slug or snail slimed the pure white fruit of fungal. You also took a bite, went down time's wormhole. You thought it was a brilliant eyelash mushroom, instead an M&M someone had dropped by mistake, or like breadcrumbs to mark a path. In every drop of stream water, paramecium or hydra hunting, predator of a tiny world invisible to my eye. That's why I had to explain by comparison to the visible. That idea comes from Aristotle, who said, but when I am talking about the invisible to you, I must explain by means of the visible. An idea that I just find so beautiful in that it creates a bridge between the kinds of experiences that we have. The watershed. Seen from the air, each marbled piece seems a map of the heart of the earth. Green twists show the forest trail, and me crossing the stepping stones to a path marked by a pink splash. It isn't that some New York abstract expressionist has splattered these hardwoods. Rather, a pioneering doctor of the last century created hikes whose steepness rehabilitates the heart with red for the most difficult. So why do I dream that you've left me, or that I've sold the house by mistake, or lost a job I've already quit? Looking down on the sumi prints I pulled late at night, seeing how water carries color, how form is fractal, unfolding in a baking pan I used to cook these pink, orange, black swirls. I wish I could see ceaseless flow, call it my life. In search of the microscopic, I went to Ottawa and studied with a very innovative program called Art Love Science, IATANA. And it brings artists, visual artists, and writers together with scientists. And we spent a week looking through microscopes and talking to scientists at various universities. And this was an experience that I really just had to write down. Nematodes, of course, are parasites. You know, I have a friendly acquaintance who worked public health who couldn't believe I had written a poem that was friendly towards nematodes. But I picked that affection up from the scientist who was studying them. The Chinese scientist studying nematodes says, every day I see the hand of God. I've seen them making love. He doesn't say mate or copulate. He says, they are like the knife of a Mongolian host in a yurt, cutting meat, says, each day I love them more and have to kill them. Poetry does somewhat oppositional things. In a way, it doesn't pick and choose. It takes you, the listener or the reader, into some experience that the poets had and then put into language. So language is in between the experience of the writer and the experience of the reader, for which we can be very happy and grateful that our minds are hardwired for language. But when you observe small children or you raise them and you spend a lot of time with them, you realize that there's years when a person can't speak. A year and a half, you know who everybody is, you know what's happening, but you can't express it. When my father was very old and had a stroke, he became aphasic. And so at the end of his life, he couldn't speak. And both of those experiences have made me grateful that there's this huge window of time where we're living with language. I used to worry when I was young that language or words obscured experience, that they put a screen up. Once you know the name of the flower, do you see the flower? But then something happened after years and years of immersion, and just like the Chinese scientist, my fondness for language, which of course is my tool, it increased. A blue window, seen from mine in the old hotel, slick streets beneath a stuttering street lamp. It's been many years since I looked out at rooms above mine, that particular feeling, a hot springs town in rain. You gave me a gift, hidden within the ordinary. A cafe life, small waterfall, Lakota star quilt, hiding in plain sight, a flicker of the ineffable, taste or scent of spring in autumn, curtain pulled back, light spilling out. This is another story that I heard that it captivated me. It's about a spelunker, a young woman who falls and gets trapped, and she's rescued. And this is the story of what's happening when she's rescued. Spelunker. The girl vanishes from the cave, separated from her partner. She falls into the crevice, is rescued 30 hours later. She's been singing. When they find her, she is belting the last verse of All Along the Watchtower for the 100th or more time. Not everyone knows enough lyrics to survive solitary confinement, but I do. For hours south on 71, South Dakota to Nebraska, I've been singing boys and girls together, and the Cape Cod girls, they have no combs. Besides the moon, that was the first thing I ever noticed was beautiful. These words, they comb their hair with codfish bones. I'm just in the cave for an hour in total darkness that the Park Service allows. Bauxite, calcite, a crust of sparkling crystals, and every song, a song of the sea that left so long ago. I'm going to read one more poem from this collection and then close with a few poems about the eclipse of the sun. Living each day as if it were my last, or at least pretending to. I ate one delicious half of a macaroon and then the other half. I'm not staying alive for any particular reason, not even for your love or the fight for justice or the pleasure of sliced cake in a glass case can keep my feet forever on this earth. I drink coffee. I don't know what I'm doing in the afternoon air of Tuesday, like a red bird on a leafless bough of redbud. Actually, I want to read a poem before the eclipse poems, which is kind of a companion piece to the palm reader because it's called Horoscope. And it's about, I would say, the search for fate or fate's search for us. Horoscope. Tiny planets fell into the flower pot. The house I was born in appeared in my dreams. The astrologer said that my charts showed sensuality, then kissed me. The caller was anonymous, but I was expecting the ant guy. It was raining inside the house. Tiny planets rose on my fingernails. The guy was to get rid of the ants, not deliver them. It was snowing in the house of money, coffee, and grief. The palm reader said I had a vitamin deficiency. My father said I'd never get into a good college. Tiny planets fell like raw sugar into my orange pico tea. My friends crossed from the house of reminiscence into the house of regret. Ants carried away the tiny planets and brought one perfect turquoise bead to the surface of the earth. I've spent 30 years in New Mexico waiting for that bead to come out of an anthill. Someone told me they had seen it once, an ancient bead, let's say in Chaco. And I spent a lot of time looking at ants, those messengers from the underworld. And I think perhaps putting it in the poem was good enough, as good as having it happen. So 2 years ago, there was a total eclipse of the sun, and we went to see it. We chased it to a good spot in Wyoming and went through Nebraska. And I just wrote about it. I put everything that happened for weeks before, during, and after into a poem that was too long, okay? Not everything is about the eclipse of the sun, I'm sorry to say. And so I trimmed it way back. And I'm just gonna read the 3 final sections from it. If I was to leave you with any thought about what is the helpful quality of poetry, I think that its helpful quality is that it illuminates the moment and it illuminates the detail, and not in some grand overarching way. It's personal. And that's a helpful place for me, and I hope for others to enter into a way of looking at the self and looking at the world. So to close, you turn away from the sun to count the cars on the freight train. We've been counting for days. Something observable, moving like Buddha nature, across the northern plains. Eclipse, drawn on a napkin, Nebraska. The waitress seems confused about the cosmos. She says she was up on the roof with her boyfriend and did not see the eclipse, but then describes how everything went dark and a star hung in the sky, except her boyfriend said it wasn't a star, it was a planet. We feel confused because this restaurant indeed was in the path of totality, and what else could she have seen? Although it makes me sad that this single mom doesn't know the morning star, the evening star is the goddess of love. We're alone again in the car, driving through Basin Land, and not Viejo getting any younger. In the dazzling light of late afternoon, east of the sun and west of the moon. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Miriam. I love how your poetry just dances through these natural expressions. And I kept thinking to myself, it's just like the Dharma, making the invisible visible and giving expression to these things. And then you said Buddha nature at the end. I was like, she knows. Thanks so much, Miriam. And for everyone watching, please see the chat stream and check out Miriam's books and her blog. And you can follow her there. And we'll close with the 4 great Bodhisattva vows.
Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Illusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Illusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody